Hello, Alaska. I wanted to give you a little update here back in Washington, D.C. I was out last week doing Marine Corps duty out at Marine Forces Pacific Command, and then back home for what we call August recess in Alaska for a number of weeks. In August, we had a lot going on there, brought up a lot of federal officials, cabinet officials, military members. We launched and finally opened the Ted Stevens Center for the study of the Arctic, Strategic Center for the Department of Defense. That's going to be great for our state. That's going to be on J-Bear. A lot of four-star flag officers who are at that important ceremony. Had the Coast Guard Commandant in Alaska, in Seward in particular, looking at perhaps home porting an icebreaker somewhere in our great state. We're going to get that done, by the way. And a fast response cutter that's coming to Seward. So great visit there. Attended the Critical Minerals Summit in Fairbanks, which was just fantastic. Great job by UAF, Department of Natural Resources, a tremendous turnout for that. And we had a broadband summit, what I called our broadband summit that my team and I hosted in Anchorage. That was with all the federal officials in charge of the broadband infrastructure dollars that are coming to Alaska, as many stakeholders as possible, with the whole idea. By the way, that's private sector, that's ANCs, that's tribes, that's boroughs, that's communities. The whole idea there, we're going to be getting a lot of federal dollars in the next 5 years to enable Alaska to finally connect ourselves to broadband and internet connectivity. The goal is to do it in every single community. Think about what that could do for jobs, for small businesses, for telehealth, for education, anywhere in our state. That's the goal. We kicked it off at this summit. So there was a lot that was going on during the recess. I'm back here, I'm bringing the message that I heard loud and clear back home, which is inflation, and high energy costs are crushing Alaskans. To be honest, crushing Americans, especially working families. I'm still shocked and pushing back on the Biden administration. You may have seen the president and a couple thousand people had a party on the White House lawn just 2 days ago on the signing of the so-called Inflation Reduction Act. The same day that more horrible news on inflation was announced, the stock market cratered. Inflation since the Biden administration began is almost 13%. Over a 40-year high. We got to get that under control. It starts with unleashing American energy, not restricting it. The other thing that we've seen, 17 months of straight wage decline. Real wages. Your wages might be going up 2%, but if inflation's going up 9%, then your wages are being cut. That's not good for anyone in Alaska, any working families in our state, in our country. We're fighting back on that. I wish the president would actually pay attention to it instead of throwing parties on the White House lawn when the bad news was announced. We're also working hard on something I know all Alaskans support. We just reported out of the Commerce Committee today, the Coast Guard bill. That is a really, really important authorization act for the great men and women of our Coast Guard. Fully funds the recapitalization of the Coast Guard fleet, does a number of things specifically in Alaska and for all the Coast Guard families. One of the things I worked hard on in that bill is to make sure you get paid just like the Marines, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force. Some of you might remember that horrendous example a couple years ago when there was a government shutdown. The military service branches were all being paid except the Coast Guard. We should never let that happen again. I committed to all the great families and members of the Coast Guard in Alaska. I was going to work hard to make sure that wouldn't happen again. Right now, there's legislation in the bill that came out of committee to make sure that won't. So keep your fingers crossed. We're going to keep pressing on that. The men and women of the Coast Guard are heroic Alaskans. They do so much for our state, for our fishermen, for everybody, to be honest, keeping people safe. So we made some good progress today on the Coast Guard. And then a couple days ago, I gave a speech on the Senate floor saying that the Defense Authorization Act that we moved out of the Armed Services Committee, on which I sit, that was very bipartisan, that we need to move that. I was calling on Senator Schumer, the majority leader, to move that legislation. One of the most important things we do here in the Congress and the U.S. Senate is defending our country, national security, national defense. The House has already passed their version of the National Defense Authorization Act. That's a bill that's critical for funding our military, taking care of our troops and their families, setting the policy for our military. And yet Senator Schumer seems like he has no intention of bringing it up maybe until December. That is an outrage. A number of us in the Senate, by the way, it's not just Republicans, it's Republicans and Democrats, have been calling on Senator Schumer, let's bring that up now. Come on, our military needs that. It's a dangerous world out there. You're seeing what's happening with regard to Russia, Ukraine, China, and Taiwan. So I'm going to keep pressing on that. That will be good for Alaska, good for our national security, good for our country. And by the way, a bill that was incredibly bipartisan. I think it was voted out of the Armed Services Committee 20-3. So stay tuned on that. And then finally, I attended the swearing in of our new Congresswoman, Mary Paltola, and welcomed her to the Congress. You know, and our delegation, we have a tradition extending decades, way before I got to the Senate, of a small delegation that works together. Small but mighty on behalf of Alaskans. I've already had good discussions with Mary Paltola on helping her set up her team for casework, for example. You know, we all do casework, both senators, our congressional office in the House, to help Alaskans with their individual challenges with federal agencies, with Social Security. When we're working together on that, that helps every Alaskan. So, casework, some of the policy issues that I think are important, whether it's the big resource development projects like Willow or Donlin or Anwar or the Ambler Road. These are all things I'm hopeful Congresswoman Paltola is going to work on with me and Senator Murkowski, and to be honest, to fight back against the unprecedented shutdown by the Biden administration of our state. So stay tuned on that, but that was a nice event that was over at the House chamber that I had the opportunity to attend a couple nights ago. So that's a quick update. Hope everybody's doing well. I'll be home soon, and that's what's going on in D.C. right now.